Croeso friends, welcome back to Opus Elenae, where we go big or go home. One of the things that has historically gotten me through some rough patches in my life has been journaling. The way that writing about what has happened forces my brain to take a jumble of thoughts bouncing around inside my head and sort them into some kind of coherent narrative helps me start to sort my feelings into something more identifiable. And once I do that, it's easier for me to begin feeling and processing those emotions in a way that feels intentional rather than haphazard. My favorite journal is a leather slipcover that I bought at a Renaissance festival in my misspent youth. I love that it's refillable, and the actual book itself is protected from wear, while the leather cover has gained this lovely patina of use over the course of absolutely nowhere near 25 years of owning it. The problem is that while I can buy journal inserts, the ones that fit are not fountain pen friendly, and they result in terrible feathering and ink bleed through. So I am calling on my I'm not going to buy it for $20 when I can do it myself for $100 worth of tools and materials audacity, one long ago college bookbinding class, and YouTube, and I'm gonna make my own. Everyone grab your cuppa. In the spirit of the holiday season, I am drinking Gingerbread Festival from Harney & Sons. It is exactly what it says on the tin, delicious, warming gingerbread in a cup. If you're interested in more tea shenanigans, I made my own solstice countdown calendar from my stash, and I am opening and drinking one a day until December 21st. If you want to see the calendar thus far, you can check out the Shorts tab or this playlist, and be sure to subscribe so you can see the rest of them. Let's get into it. Of course, before starting the project, I'll need to gather my supplies. A large gridded cutting mat, bookboard, paper, book cloth, cardstock, hinge cloth, spacing tools, a small gridded ruler, a longer metal ruler, craft knife, bone folder, flat brush, medium weight linen thread, beeswax, and PVA glue. To make my own book cloth, I'll need tissue paper, cotton broadcloth, and heat and bond. I have an old journal insert that fits into the leather slipcover, so I can use it to determine the measurements for the covers and spine. I would be fine using this one, except that, like I said, the fountain pen ink feathers and bleeds through something awful. Bookboard is a kind of compressed cardboard that is acid-free and is used for the covers and sometimes the spines of hand-bound books. The easiest way to get a clean cut is with a sharp craft knife. I thought at first that I would be fine using a plain, ready-made book cloth since the book will be hidden inside the slipcover, but upon reflection, I decided to try and make my own with a printed broadcloth that I had. That way it'll look pretty on the shelf after I've journaled all the way through it. After ironing the fabric nice and flat, I'll use the plain book cloth as a template to cut the bird fabric and the heat and bond so I can iron them together. I'm also going to iron the tissue paper. I don't want any wrinkles in either material. Any inconsistency would be very visible on the finished product. I'm going to leave everything alone until thoroughly cooled, and then I can peel off the heat and bond backing and iron the tissue paper onto the back of the fabric. I'm taking my time with this step, making sure that the whole surface is heated evenly and to a fairly high heat to make sure the glue is fully activated. Once everything is, again, fully cooled, I'll start putting together the cover. I'm going to mark the midpoint of the fabric and make sure all the sides are perfectly square. Then I'll start by covering the spine with PVA glue and placing it along that center line. I want an even layer that isn't so thick that it will soak through to the front of the book cloth. Working outward from the spine, I'll use the spacers to make sure that I glue the cover into place perfectly. Then I'll repeat on the other side and smooth down the book cloth with my bone folder. After that, I'll use the template to cut off the corners of the book cloth. Then I can paint a layer of glue on the top and bottom edges of the book cloth and fold them to the inside of the cover, again smoothing them with my bone folder. Before I glue and fold the remaining sides, I'll take a moment to shape the corners just to make sure they're nice and crisp. Once all the edges are turned in, I'll go over them all with the bone folder, paying special attention to the spaces in between cover and spine. I want the fabric pushed in there as much as possible. Then, to make sure everything dries nice and flat, I'll put a layer of plastic over the cover and stack some heavy books on it and leave it overnight. Next morning, it's time to deal with the paper. I've gotten a ream of Tomoe River Artist paper, which strikes a nice balance between being lightweight and thick enough for fountain penning to not show through. But I hate writing on blank paper, so I'm printing a 4mm dot grid on front and back of each sheet, which didn't take as long as you might think. I'm dividing the paper up into 11 stacks of 7 sheets each. These stacks will get folded in half to form signatures, which will be sewn together to form the book block. I like to fold each sheet individually to make sure that the folds are sharp and exact. It's a lot easier to sew the signatures together if there are holes already in the signatures, so I've made a template to make sure that the spacing of the holes is consistent, and I'm using an awl that is very sharp if you accidentally stab yourself with it. Ask me how I know. Time to sew the book block. First, I'll need a piece of medium weight linen thread, the length of the book block times the number of signatures, in my case 11. Then I'll run the thread through the beeswax a couple of times for strength and smoothness. I'm using a curved needle because that's how I learned in college, but I think it might have been more trouble than it's worth. Next time, I'll try a straight blunt needle and see if it's easier. To sew the signatures, I am basically doing a running stitch starting from the outside. Since there are an even number of holes, the thread will end up on the outside at the other end of the spine. Then I'll stack another signature on the top and start sewing back in the other direction. This time though, when the thread comes to the outside of the signature, I'll loop the needle through the thread below, locking the two together. At the last holes of subsequent signatures, I'll tie a knot around the loop below before starting the next. Tension is important during this phase. Too tight and the book block will want to fan out instead of laying flat. Too loose and the book won't be sturdy. Time to break out the glue again. After the block is sewn, I'll clamp it flush between two scrap pieces of bookboard that I've wrapped in clear packing tape. My very professional setup is standing it up between a couple stacks of books. Normally this would be done with a book press, but I don't have one. We persist. I'm painting an even coat of glue on the spine, making sure to fully saturate the threads, and then I'll leave it overnight to dry before adding another coat. Historically, end bands, the little raised band that sits at the top and bottom of a hardcover book spine, is made by sewing around a cord into the signatures of a book block. They were used to strengthen and shape the spine. I, however, am totally faking it by gluing pieces of my book cloth around cord to make faux end bands. I'm going to add a second layer of glue over the spine, and while it's wet, I'll be adding a length of ribbon to act as a bookmark, as well as the end bands. Once those are in place and thoroughly saturated, I'm going to cut a rectangle of hinge cloth just a little shorter than the length of the spine and about 2 inches wider on both sides. While that second coat is drying, I'll grab my cardstock and fold 2 pieces in half to be the end papers. These will connect the book block to the cover. But the cardstock isn't strong enough to be a sustainable solution, I hear you say. Stick with me, the bookbinders of yore figured it out ages ago. After the glue is fully dry, I'll unclamp the block and remove the boards. The packing tape makes it easier to separate them. Then I can trim down the edges of the block. They say that it's possible to do with a metal ruler and a craft knife, and it's true, as long as by possible you mean technically achievable but incredibly sloppy looking. I ended up having to sand down the block after cutting, and even then I'm not happy with the way it came out. In the future, I will need a different solution. To attach the end papers, I'm going to use a sheet of cardstock to mask off about 3/8 of an inch at the fold and apply glue. Then I'll place it onto the block, making sure the edges and the fold are aligned correctly. Rinse and repeat on the other side. Back into the makeshift book stand for one more coat of glue on the spine. There's a lot of gluing in this process. I don't know if you've noticed. Now I can attach the hinge cloth, which is a heavily sized and stiffened cheesecloth. It's added specifically to reinforce the connection of book block to cover. See, I told you the cardstock wouldn't rip. Thank you to all of my current and continuing Ko-fi members. Your support and the support of all of my members and croissants makes it easier to do what I do and provide the quality content for everyone. Thank you so much. Stick around after this brief commercial break to see me assemble the journal. Now that we have the 2 halves of the book ready, it's time to combine them. I'll start by trimming the corners of the hinge cloth to make sure it doesn't peek out from the end papers. Then I'll place some thick plastic between the end paper and book block so no glue gets onto the pages. Time to go ham on the glue again. I want an even coat thick enough to secure the hinge cloth and to not dry too quickly. You'll notice I've put the block onto the cover or case so that I can work quickly once the glue is on. I'm going to gently attach the top edge of the end paper to the cover, eyeballing the placement. I want equal borders around all 3 sides of the cover. Then I'll flip the book around so the cover's flat on the table, and using the plastic to prevent marks, gently smooth the end paper down, moving from edge to spine. I want to ease out every bubble and wrinkle for a nice flat surface. I'll leave the plastic where it is. I don't want any moisture from the glue to get into the book block. Then I can repeat the process on the other side. Once the end papers are firmly attached, I'll grab a couple knitting needles to place in the crease of the hinge so that it gets that nice dip between spine and cover. Then I'll pile books on top one more time and let it dry weighted to prevent the covers from warping. Thanks for sticking around. It was intensely satisfying to make something that wasn't clothes for a change. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you want to support the channel, you can watch another one of my videos, share to social media, or more directly, drop a tip in the Ko-fi jar. And no matter what, make sure to join the Discord to meet a fantastic community of like-minded nerds. Until next time, be kind, do the work, continue supporting marginalized people, and keep creating. Whoa.